JD Vance, thank you for this. We're on the road. You're in Phoenix.
Yep.
So where is the race right now? I mean, sincerely, to the best of, well, first of all, before we start, who is that?
Viewers were stunned when JD Vance burst into tears and announced his resignation live on television. How did such an unexpected and emotional flashpoint develop? Was it a very personal struggle under increasing pressure, or was his sudden decision motivated by something much larger? The truth about his departure could be more complex than anyone could have imagined. You won't want to miss what's coming. This revelation could change everything we knew about JD Off Balance. From author to legislator, Vance JJD Vance's story goes beyond a simple one of personal achievement. This contemporary American narrative speaks to the soul of a changing country. Born in Middletown, Ohio in 1984, he lacked political connections, wealth, and influence. Rather, he shaped himself through insecurity, addiction, and the daily grind of a Rust Belt town struggling to survive in post-industrial America. His mother, Bev, battled addiction for the majority of his early years, leaving the family dynamic shattered and chaotic. There was no always present father figure. Rather, there was a succession of stepfathers, boyfriends, and fleeting moments of normalcy. Working with Lindsay and his older sister, JD, he generally found himself navigating emotional minefields. Among the chaos, one constant remained: Mama, the mother's grandmother. She was very dear. Mama is a tough-talking woman with a heart of steel. She provided the structure and love he required. She kept a pistol in her purse and didn't object when the law was enacted. Seeing her grandson's promise, she encouraged him to leave their hometown. JD demonstrated her tenacity and unwavering support, discovered the desire to see himself as more than the result of his surroundings. After high school, Vance enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, marking his first major departure from Middletown and into adulthood. His military experience, which included a deployment to Iraq, taught him discipline, organization, and responsibility that he lacked in his previous life. As a military journalist, Vance began honing his ability to communicate complex ideas precisely. Years later, this skill would prove invaluable in unexpected ways. His service came to an end, and he jumped back into academia. He attended Ohio State University and studied political science and philosophy. Unlike many of his classmates, Vance had experienced the same problems they discussed in theory. His perspective was influenced far more by his blue-collar background than by mere background knowledge. With only 2 years of study completed, he graduated summa cum laude. Nonetheless, his admission to Yale Law School marked the true tipping point. This planet had nothing like Middletown's caravan parks. Walking the line between two identities, the Ivy League student attempting to make sense of elite America and the hillbilly child from Ohio, he discovered opportunity and conflict at Yale. Amy Chua, a Yale lecturer best known for her book Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, saw something special in him. She encouraged him to write about his life not only as a scholarly hobby, but also as a powerful lens through which most elites could not see a portion of America. What began as papers and class notes grew into something more. Hillbilly Elegy came out in 2016. The memoir was raw, honest, and unvarnished. Vance discussed his childhood, his mother's addiction, his grandparents' turbulent love, the community that shaped him, and the people who were left behind after the economic downturn. The book, which was published during a time of political division, spoke to me deeply. It provided insight into the frustrations and suffering of working-class white Americans, a group that was occasionally written about, but rarely heard from. Hillbilly Elegy began to appear among the New York Times bestsellers. JJD Vance transformed from a failing law student to a national voice overnight. He sought political commentary, was invited to talk shows, and received praise for brilliantly capturing something very real about America's cultural divide. Some described him as the link between liberal elites and conservative heartland values. Vance went from celebrity to business. He co-founded Naria Capital, a venture capital firm, with the goal of investing in startups outside of traditional tech hotspots, such as Silicon Valley. His specific goals were to help small-town entrepreneurs and redirect funds into sectors that had been lost to the global economy. He frequently discussed how the brain drain in Ohio could be reversed with the right tools and vision. But another person called out to me: political concerns. J.D. Vance will declare his candidature for the United States in 2021. Senators from Ohio. This was not an easy race. After his previous remarks about Donald Trump drew criticism, he had to navigate a crowded Republican primary. Vance, however, could see the story. He was personally acquainted with it. He presented himself as a champion of the forgotten, speaking for households similar to his own. He adopted a populist message, combining economic nationalism with conservative cultural elements. He won the Republican primary and defeated Democrat Tim Ryan in the 2022 general election. His victory cut across political lines. It mentioned resonance and narratives. Ohio voters saw in Vance someone who had traveled their path, endured their hardships, and was now prepared to speak for their cause on a national scale. Vance was a first-time politician, but he brought to the Senate a unique combination of life experience, intellectual rigor, and narrative power. He arrived outside the university. He came from a struggling town that people had written off, and he was tenacious. Most importantly, he came from a place of integrity, presenting something unique in politics: authenticity, rather than claiming to have all of the answers. From a small child in Middletown to a best-selling author and later a U.S. senatorship entails more than just career advancement. This is a question in class about identity and second chances. J.D. Although Vance may have traded in steel towns for marble halls, every word he says reflects his upbringing. Could J.D. rise quickly from memoirist to senator? Will Vance's next chapter be even more unexpected? Come stay and get to know us. The transition to vice presidency. The evening of the 2024 presidential election appeared to be a victory for both the Trump campaign and the country. The focus quickly shifted to the future of the vice presidency, as TV screens flashed numbers indicating an unannounced Republican ticket victory. The entire country had seen J.D. rise. Few expected Senator to go from a best-selling author to a current vice presidential candidate in the United States. But given the vast distances that separate American politics, it seemed fitting that he was finally the result of an incredible journey. 2 years after his Senate victory, Vance had ventured into a completely different field, one that was likely to garner unprecedented national attention. His rapid rise from legislative rookie to vice presidential candidate surprised me as well. He was no longer just a spectator, but also an essential component of a ticket designed to change America's course. Vance had always deviated from the usual path. From Marine veteran to Ivy League graduate, venture capitalist, and outsider turned senator, he was a man of contradictions. The story of his rise had captivated the country, but now that he is the vice presidential candidate, it will see him in a new light. And Vance, the man who had written about the vanished American communities, was prepared to take on a new, pivotal role in the White House. Many people wanted to know what kind of Vice President J.D. might be. What is MANA? Unlike other vice presidential candidates, who were typically chosen as placeholders or to politically offset a ticket, Vance stood out. Given his reputation for directness, populism, and proximity to the issues that affect working-class Americans, he was not going to play second fiddle. In the months leading up to the inauguration, Vance worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He disliked playing a supporting role. As vice president-elect, he quickly became an active member of the transition team. In his best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, he focused on developing a strategy to meet the needs of the people he had assisted. His campaign pledges clearly stated that his priorities were rural development, job creation, and economic revival. Those gathered around him recognized J.D. Vance's on-the-ground experience with the effects of the economic downturn, as well as his Ohioan heritage, would provide him with a unique understanding of the core of the American working class. Beyond his policy knowledge, He was clearly motivated to change American political direction and leave a legacy. However, not everything went smoothly. As he prepared for his new position, Vance felt increasingly pressured. Critics of his past began to emerge, particularly regarding his pre-Senate remarks on Donald Trump. Many people felt that his transition from Trump critic to vice presidential candidate was too sudden and dramatic. Vance, on the other hand, wasn't concerned. His candor, which made people uncomfortable at times, direct, harsh, was part of his appeal. Then he turned and faced it. In one of his first interviews following the vice presidential nomination, he directly addressed the shift. "Though I disagreed with Trump most of the time, I see America's future and believe I can make a significant contribution to its transformation." Still, Vance's position improved as Inauguration Day approached. His contribution to the transformation became increasingly significant. He was more than a ceremonial figurehead. He was assisting in the development of the new government's message, arranging meetings with potential cabinet candidates, and debating policy ideas. His expertise in rural issues, workforce development, and the rebuilding of America's manufacturing base made him an invaluable asset to the newly elected government. Among the most important decisions Vance made in those early days was advocating for a comprehensive rural development plan, which had been largely absent from American politics for years. It addressed more than just reversing the Rust Belt economy. It was about changing national possibilities. Working with policymakers, economists, and experts, Vance developed a framework to ensure that the American worker's legacy was not lost in the rush to embrace Silicon Valley technology, as well as to assist workers in retraining for new sectors and revitalizing underserved areas. Vance began to leave his mark, but he remained a man grounded in his roots. He paid a rare return visit to Middletown shortly before the inauguration and spoke candidly about what the vice president's office meant to him. Vance suggested a small gathering when you arrive in Washington. "It's easy to forget where you're from, but that's the difference. People like you and my family, which is why I'm here." Those who had previously supported him would have found this message particularly relevant. For Vance, his next project in Washington went beyond simple policy. It was for the people he had always represented, the ones who had molded him. His growing power drew attention from all political angles at the same time. Some saw him as a new face in American politics, capable of closing the gap between the establishment and the grassroots. Others speculated that he could run for higher office in the future. Conservative circles are already talking about the 2028 presidential election. Nonetheless, Vance maintained his concentration. Right now, he would tell anyone who inquired about his future, "My job is to be the best vice president I can be." When January 20th, 2025 rolled around, Vance silently took the oath of office. The significance of the event was felt personally as well as nationally. Not only a former writer, but also a heartbeat separate from the presidency, no longer a senator. Vance arrived at work with a clear vision and a strong sense of identity. Still, the actual test was just getting started. Could he keep the campaign road promises he had made? Can he use his unique position to effect real, meaningful change? Not long from now, the country and the world will learn. Vance, vice president, was determined, however, to ensure that his new position was more than just a stepping stone to his political future. It was a forum for genuine change among Americans, the very people who had raised, shaped, and trusted him. And it became clear in the following months that he would not be satisfied with the traditional vice presidential role. He was willing to contribute in previously unthinkable ways to shape the future. JD, I'd like to know what Vance had to give up in order to truly embrace the responsibility of the office he was about to inherit. Let us define precisely. January 9th, 2025, JD resigned and followed through. Vance said something that altered the political landscape in Ohio. He left his American job Senate, good at midnight, preparing for his upcoming inauguration as U.S. Vice President. Although this action appeared to be the pinnacle of his political career, it also marked a significant shift in Ohio politics with far-reaching consequences. Vance decided to resign slowly. That decision reflected his own public service goals, the complexities of his position, and the timing of the national political scene. His life path had been anything but conventional. Leaving the Senate represents the next chapter in a story that has taken him from best-selling author to U.S. Senator and now Vice President. What influenced his decision to take this course? First and foremost, his vice presidential nomination was unprecedented for Ohio, and for him specifically. Few could have predicted that when Vance first entered the Senate in 2022, his path would quickly take him in such a grand direction. However, following Donald Trump's successful campaign in the 2024 presidential election, Vance found himself in an unexpected position as the running mate for a former president looking to retake the White House. Not only was his election to the vice presidency a personal triumph, but Ohio, a state that had long been a focal point for national elections, also underwent a radical political transformation. As the months before the inauguration passed, Vance's responsibilities increased. He handled his Senate responsibilities and began preparing for a new, far more important position in the executive branch. It extended beyond Washington's personal experience. It was about realizing that by becoming vice president, he would be giving up a Senate seat that was critical to his state. Ohio needs someone to advance the Republican agenda and cover the Hoover. At that point, Vance needed to make a decision. Clearly, he needed to leave the Senate in order to devote his full attention to his new position. The vice presidency entailed significant responsibility, and there was no easy way to balance the two. The decision concerned not only what would be best for his constituents in Ohio and the country as a whole, but also what would advance his career. Despite how much time he had spent as a senator, he was unable to focus on two of the most important offices in the country because his new job required all of it. Vance's departure triggered a series of events within Ohio's political structure. The state had to immediately select a successor to serve out the remainder of his Senate term while his seat was vacant. Republican Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, who had previously worked closely with Vance during his brief Senate tenure, was now in charge of making this decision. Timing is absolutely essential. The state needed a consistent man to replace Vance and continue his work. Days later, on January 21, 2025, Vance's resignation from the United States was approved by the Senate. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Houston to fill the vacancy. Houston, a seasoned Republican with extensive Ohio political knowledge, previously served as Secretary of State and a member of the Ohio House of Representatives. His nomination was viewed as a deliberate effort to maintain Senate continuity and Republican control. However, the period preceding this appointment was characterized by political wrangling and intense speculation. Governor DeWine bore significant responsibility for selecting a successor who could not only meet interim needs, but also run a strong candidate in the next special election. Many well-known Republicans were considered for the position. Each brought unique qualifications and political ramifications. Frank LaRose, Secretary of State, began to demonstrate strong competitiveness. LaRose was well known for his efforts to modernize Ohio's voting systems. He also had administrative experience and a statewide reputation. Early polls showed that despite his credentials, he trailed Houston by 78% in a poly-market prediction market, receiving only 17% support. Attorney General Dave Yost, known for his legal expertise and public service record, was regarded as a reasonable candidate. Yost, however, declined the offer, preferring to focus on a potential gubernatorial run in 2026. Governor DeWine emphasized the importance of selecting someone who is committed to serving beyond the temporary term. He sought a candidate who was determined and capable of winning the 2026 special election and thus would always serve Ohio. DeWine's standards included a strong work ethic, putting Ohio's interests first, and successfully navigating both primary and general elections. After much consideration, DeWine appointed John Houston to the open Senate seat. Houston's extensive experience and alignment with DeWine's Ohio vision made him the best representative for the United States Senate. His appointment was viewed as a calculated move to ensure effective Ohioan representation while maintaining Republican strength. While Houston was preparing for his new role, political dynamics in Ohio continued to shift. The upcoming special election in 2026 will determine the end of Vance's term. The selection process and subsequent appointment highlighted how closely public service, political strategy, and experience interact to shape Ohio's national representation. How does our perception of this road differ depending on the voice of someone usually behind the scenes? Let us discover together. One person had been unusually quiet while J.D. Vance's political foray was making headlines all over. Usha Vance breaks her silence. His marriage is with her. Usha had chosen to stay mostly out of the way during her husband's explosive climb, sharpening her legal mind on her own. But Usha emerged from the shadows with quiet strength and honesty, attracting attention as the reality of his new vice presidential position became clear, rather than with a campaign slogan or political speech. J.D. had benefited from Usha years from now. While he negotiated political terrain, she managed her demanding legal career and raised their children. Although the public had seen her in photographs or at events, she had rarely spoken in a setting where cameras rolled or microphones amplified her voice. Usha made a rare public appearance at a Cincinnati town hall event in early 2025, shortly after J.D.'s Senate resignation with no political aspirations or polished speech. She instead delivered a deeply personal reflection on what the previous few years had truly meant for their family. Her low voice conveyed emotion as she discussed the late evenings spent alone with her children, the stress of parenting during extended absences, and the anxiety of seeing her husband take on increasingly high-stakes responsibilities. It's difficult to explain to a 6-year-old why their dad can't come to their school play, she said when she stopped. It is much more difficult to explain to oneself. Usha's comments were extremely honest, which gave them significant power. She did not celebrate their path or portray herself as a victim. She simply informed them of the costs they incurred and how public service had transformed not only J.D., but their entire family. Her remarks painted a comprehensive picture of the often overlooked sacrifices made by political leaders as they advance in rank. Not only did the office make demands, the majority of it stemmed from the campaign, regular travel, public criticism, and peaceful times at home. Usha admitted that making the decision to become more visible was difficult. She had chosen to support J.D. despite her tendency to remain quiet, leave the sidelines. However, the gravity of the situation necessitated a different approach with his appointment as vice president. She realized it was something the country needed, and she could help it see the human side of its leaders. She stated in an interview that it wasn't just greetings or headlines. Every decision and change has an impact on families like ours. Her appearance raised a lot of questions. Commentators from all political backgrounds praised her subdued demeanor during the debate. Some praised her for speaking at the right time, not to gain influence but to share her perspective, while others said she was a refreshing change from the more scripted political spouses. Not taking on a permanent public role, she was clearly providing a behind-the-scenes look at a time when the country was eager to learn more about the people behind the politics. Usha opened up even more at another event in Columbus, sharing how carefully her husband had considered his Senate resignation decision. She reported that we talked for extended periods of time, including late into the evening. He enjoyed serving Ohio, but we both knew that the position he was applying for would require everything: his mind, his time, and most importantly, his heart. She emphasized that their decision was not solely driven by ambition. Despite the new challenges, the decision was motivated by intention and the belief that one could influence events. Friends of the family noted that Usha was instrumental in grounding J.D. throughout his career. Usha brought balance, despite his public persona being sometimes driven, direct, and strong. She was silent, deliberate, and meditative. J.D. S decision-making process became primarily focused on her ability to guide, listen, and allow for complexity. She lacked an official title, but her influence was quiet and powerful. In the weeks after her public appearances, Usha became a figure of interest, not because she sought attention, but because people were drawn to her authenticity. Publications highlighting her Yale academic background, legal accomplishments, and Supreme Court clerking experience surfaced. Nonetheless, the emphasis remained on her performance as a mother and partner, navigating a life that had fundamentally altered in public view. One of the most moving responses came from a Toledo mother who wrote an open letter thanking Usha for speaking up. "You reminded us that behind every senator or vice presidential candidate is someone holding the home together," said the note. "Your strength is quiet, but it resonates loudly with everyone watching." Voters had seen well-crafted family photos and polished campaign videos for years, but Usha's words gave those still images depth and passion. This also sparked more general discussions about the toll political life has on families, particularly couples. As the inauguration approached, Usha withdrew into a more private life. She reminded the public that these positions are held in kitchens, nurseries, and quiet hallways, surrounded by difficult decisions and silent prayers, rather than on stage. Her brief time in the spotlight, however, had an impact. It emphasized the importance of telling the whole truth, not just the bits that appear on campaign posters, as well as the virtues of openness and integrity. Her voice did not only resound throughout the theater. Usha Vance not only broke her silence, but she also defied the norm in a few carefully chosen events by emphasizing the strength and vulnerability and changing the way the emotional reality of public service is perceived and shared. Many Americans had never seen anyone talk so openly about the emotional toll of public service. Raw, real, and impossible to ignore, quiet strength captures national attention, public reaction, and media coverage. Usha Vance, J.D. S wife, experienced an unexpected on-air incident. When her obvious emotional reaction to a reporter's inquiry was broadcast live in a morning television segment, viewers across the country reacted in waves. Although brief, the episode struck a chord with many who saw it as a raw, unfiltered look at the personal cost of life in public. Major news outlets extensively covered the event, with clips circulating on platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Many viewers identified with Usha's response, seeing it as a raw expression of the strain political life can put on families. Thousands of users sent encouraging messages, drawing attention to the larger debate about emotional resilience, the importance of public service, and the sometimes hidden sacrifices made by politicians, spouses, and children. Social media hashtags related to Usha Vance trended for several hours. Commentators and reporters who presented the event as a reminder that behind every political figure is a family under intense and ongoing scrutiny strengthened the story rather than portraying it as a lapse or failure. Mental health advocates took advantage of the opportunity to raise awareness about the emotional toll of high-stakes political campaigns. The conversation expanded beyond sympathy to a broader discussion of how little assistance political families receive in navigating the glare of constant media coverage. For many, the moment humanized the Vance family in a way that political speeches and press releases rarely do. Many prominent people from various disciplines expressed their opinions, including psychologists, political analysts, and even former political spouses, with many emphasizing the need for greater compassion and understanding. Meanwhile, late-night shows and editorial columns generated conflicting responses. While some approached the subject with gravity, emphasizing the link between public service and personal vulnerability, others turned to humor. If J.D. Vance's emotional retraction surprises you, please like and share your thoughts below. Make sure to check the cards for more amazing political events and revelations, even if they are in different tones. This opens a window into the emotionally charged terrain of political life, which is rarely acknowledged but extremely important.